by the chair. Good afternoon, distinguished representatives. I declare open the sixth plenary meeting of the 20th session of the Assembly of State Parties, which is dedicated to Agenda Item 12, Review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute System. And I'm here accompanied by the two dedicated representatives to the review mechanism, Ambassador von den Eysel and Ambassador Kanu, and also the focal points for the court. Now, it is really my pleasure to preside over this meeting, which will consider an issue that it is indeed a priority topic of the Assembly of State Parties, and indeed a crucial exercise to strengthen the Rome Statute system. Since their appointment by the Bureau on 5 February 2021, the members of the review mechanism, together with the working groups, the Assembly mandate holders and the Court, have been working very intensively on the assessment and implementation of the independent expert review recommendations. This Assembly session is an opportune moment for us to take stock of where we stand with the exercise, what has been achieved this year, and what still needs to be done before its conclusion next year. The work of the mechanism is a very complex and meticulous exercise. With input from the Assembly mandate holders, they have successfully submitted their midterm report and final reports this year. The reports serve as a useful guide and update on this very complicated review process and enabled to move forward. The work presented by the review mechanism provides excellent momentum for the strengthening of the ICC and the system as a whole. During its mandate, the review mechanism has periodically updated the Bureau on its progress. And for its part, the Bureau has also participated in this endeavor by implementing the recommendations assigned to it directly. To this effect, the Bureau has proposed a mechanism to ensure an appropriate concerted response against any threat or attack against the Court, its officials, and those cooperating with it, which has the potential to undermine the integrity, effectiveness, or impartiality of the Court. And the Secretariat of the Assembly has prepared a compilation of potential measures to be taken to counter such threats or attacks based on submissions made by state parties and civil society to be added to the mechanism. As indicated by the independent experts, as recognized in the compilation, also preemptively conduct public activities is extremely important to inform relevant stakeholders and the public about the Court and to promote its work. Also, with the upcoming 25th anniversary of the adoption of the Rome Statute next year, we will have the opportunity to give additional visibility to the Rome Statute system and discuss the strategic vision for the next 10 years, as recommended also by the independent experts. For the commemoration of these auspicious milestones, the Bureau proposes that the Assembly entrust it with the organization of the commemoration process to start in New York at the beginning of July 2023. While the assessment and the conversation, the discussions on the next 10 years will also include a conversation on the review mechanism and the way forward beyond it. While the assessment of some recommendations of the review is still pending, I understand that many more have already been implemented or are in the process of being implemented. This is indeed work in progress, but a great deal of progress has already been made. I would like to thank and commend the review mechanism, but in particular, the state party representatives, Ambassador Kanu and Ambassador van den Eysel, for having deployed great efforts throughout the process to carry out their mandate in such an effective, detailed, but in particular inclusive and transparent manner. I would also like to commend the Court for its proactive approach to these recommendations. I would also like to recall that it is not only the Court but also the Assembly ourselves that must also play an active role in the process, as some recommendations are indeed addressed to us, the Assembly. Let me conclude by thanking all stakeholders for having participated in this very complex exercise to bring about a stronger ICC. I encourage you to continue doing so in the future until the completion of the entire process. Some of the recommendations still need to be implemented, as I said, and some of the issues are indeed permanent challenges for the system that will always require our attention beyond the review, such as the improvement of the performance of the system, of all components of the system, or, for instance, the work culture. I truly trust that the work already done will better equip us to address effectively the great challenges ahead. I thank you for your attention, and I now invite the state party representatives on the review mechanism, Ambassador Paul van den Eysel from the Netherlands and Ambassador Kanu from Sierra Leone, to deliver some remarks on this topic. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, for the floor. As usual, Co-Chair Ambassador van der Eysel and I will jointly deliver the opening remarks. But first, let me thank you, Madam President, for the very kind words directed to the co-chairs, but also the review mechanism as a whole. But also thank you for your very insightful remarks. It is our honor to welcome you and to have you participate in this plenary on the review of the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. We do appreciate the strong support we have always enjoyed from you as President, and indeed all state parties, the court, civil society, and all stakeholders. We recall that you have indicated on a number of occasions how important the review is for the court, state parties, and all stakeholders. And given your long-standing and special link with the court, we know that you do take this issue very much to heart. So thank you so much. State parties representative, as we've indicated in the concept note, would like us to have an interactive discussion today on the progress made and the ideas of stakeholders for the future of the review mechanism. And so, their colleagues, state parties representatives, civil society, and other stakeholders, today's plenary is intended to give the opportunity to all delegations, especially those that have not been able to participate more fully during the year, to contribute to these important discussions. We very much encourage you to take advantage of the presence of the review mechanism, the court focal point, and indeed the President, and raise any questions or comment on the review process. While there is a list of speakers, we encourage you, even if you have not inscribed, to take the floor to make points that you wish to raise on the progress of the review mechanism and its future. We wish to remind the remote participant, as indicated in the concept note, that they have the opportunity to send questions or comments via email to the address indicated in the concept note. We intend also to answer those questions so as to ensure that all participants can contribute to our discussion. Having indicated how we would like to proceed, we'll turn now to our introduction and discussions properly, and then I would invite Ambassador van der Eijsel to proceed with the rest of the remarks from the review mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Without further ado, I will continue. You will recall that at the first plenary meeting of this Assembly, we have introduced our report on the review process submitted pursuant to the resolution of last year. We told you that we've had 10 meetings in 2023 as platform for discussion to focus on the recommendations with a timeline for assessment in the first half and second half of 2022. And this is all based on the comprehensive action plan, which has been our roadmap for the assessment of all the recommendations and still is for the last remaining recommendations. As you know, we have allocated recommendations to different facilitations as platform for discussion, and we do welcome the work on the IER recommendations by the various facilitators, and we are grateful for the fact that they have made progress and in many cases completed the assessment of the recommendations assigned to them. The mechanism itself also assessed most of the recommendations which it allocated to itself as indicated in our reports. I wish also to recall, and I say this often every time I report to the Hague Working Group or the Bureau, but it is important to keep in mind that the review is not a box-ticking exercise, but at the end of the day, we try to achieve what we think is our common goal, to strengthen the court and to make it more efficient and effective. That means that all the work we've done collectively in the last 2 years should result in concrete changes on the ground. Therefore, we intend to organize in 2023 additional discussions or roundtables on the implementation of recommendations that we already have assessed positively and either are at the beginning of implementation or are being implemented, just to keep track of the implementation. A few words on the matrix. The matrix reflects the progress in the assessment of the IER recommendations. We plan to circulate it as soon as possible. It is always a lot of work, and it's getting a bigger piece of work because more and more recommendations are assessed. As you know, the idea is to give you an overview of where we are in the process, both on assessment and implementation. And it is formally an annex, but it will, I think, be circulated in the coming week, I hope. And once more, I would like to highlight that the matrix is a living document which we intend to update regularly until all the recommendations have been assessed, to give you an overview of the state of play. On the resolution, we have circulated a standalone resolution. I think most of you have seen the text. It was circulated in November. We will hold informal consultations on the draft tomorrow. We hope we can have consensus after a short discussion. And we thank the state parties for their constructive engagement and the flexibility shown in the informal and bilateral consultations that took place. On the progress of the work, as I said, I just referred to the report which we have circulated. To give a little bit more substance or a reminder, in the last year we have continued work and concluded work on recommendations such as Recommendation 105 on tenure, Recommendation 169 on external political measures against the court, and the President referred to that. We had roundtables on workplace culture, gender equality and geographical representation, and the details of these meetings are contained in the report. On the future, now that most of the recommendations have been assessed and some are already being implemented, the Assembly And also the review mechanism has to pay greater attention on the implementation of the recommendations that have been positively assessed for the reasons I described before. We think that the review mechanism will continue its work as platform for discussion on the last remaining recommendations that have to be assessed, and we will continue to submit progress reports. We also intend to monitor the overall progress of the review progress, both in terms of assessment and on implementation where appropriate, including, of course, as I said, the implementation. And we will continue and perhaps even increase the number of roundtables on implementation of possibly assessed recommendations. That seems logical to us because we have assessed more and more recommendations, as I said, so we have to shift the focus to implementation. On this future, let me just say that we're also very interested to hear from you today or in the coming weeks how you see the future of the review mechanism. And just for those who weren't there when we were established at that time, it was very clear that this should not be an eternal body, but so even temporary can last a few years. But we are very interested in your views on what the future of the mechanism should be. I think I stop there, Madam Chair, and give the floor back to you. Thank you very much.
I thank you very much for your very clear and, as usual, concise presentations. And now I'll give I invite the court to make some remarks.
Thank you, Madam President, Madam Chair. So, having discussed with my co-focal points, Juan from the registry and Racine from OTP, we decided to give you a very brief description of how we have seen things from the angle of the court. In terms of the process, as you all know, there have been two sets of discussions, one before each of the judicial recesses of the court, one up to July and the other one up to now, the ASP, where we have presented the work of the court to the review mechanism itself, but also the relevant facilitations. And that's the process, the way we've worked. It's been, we believe, a very good interaction with the state's parties through the facilitations and obviously the review mechanism. On substance, we've seen things in the following way. On the recommendations, there is one set which is really the court-wide ones, where the three of us have been interacting, and I should say, if I may, that the interaction between the three organs have been the manifestation, a successful manifestation of the one court principle. It's been extremely constructive with my colleagues and therefore the other organs of the three principal organs. We've had, of course, in that process also the trust fund for victims in the discussions. And there were also the organ-specific, of course, recommendations that each of us presented. So did the Trust Fund for Victims. On the status update, as you said, Madam President, and the co-chairs, we haven't done a statistical analysis, but we believe that anywhere between 80 to 90% of the recommendations appear to have been, in the initial assessment appears to have been done. Again, and this applies to both the court-wide ones and the organ-specific ones. On the implementation, again, as you said, Madam Chair, but I would like to actually re-emphasize and recall what you've said. Many of them have already been implemented. There was an almost automatic implementation that came with these initial assessments. Others are being implemented, and many others will need to be implemented, and obviously this is going to be done in complete synergy and transparency with the relevant bodies next year. Finally, I wanted also, on behalf of my colleagues and myself, thank the ambassadors, Van den Eysel and Kanu, for their patience with us, having shown the patience. Also the country focal points, Bangladesh, Chile, and Poland, for having always listened to us. And the facilitations, all the various facilitations with which we had to discuss sometimes daily, right up to the meeting, to be sure that we were all on the same page. And last but not least, Gail and Aaron from the Secretariat, who were always available to help in the last minute. And with that, I'll conclude. I'll keep it short and happy later for each of us to take questions. Thank you.
I thank you very much for these remarks, and now I will leave this plenary session in the competent hands of the co-chairpersons of the review mechanism. So I hand it over to you, ambassadors, and I wish you a very productive and interesting discussion. I thank you.
Thank you again, Madam President, for your commitment to the review process, but also your overall leadership of the Assembly of State Parties. Distinguished representatives, we've had the views and remarks of the Assembly of State Parties President and the Court, as well as our remarks. As informed or said by Ambassador van der Eysel, we're really here to hear from you and other participants. We do have a list of speakers. The plan is to go according to the list of speakers in the first part, and then we'll open it up for the interactive dialogue, in which all you need to do is to just press your speaker's button to indicate that you want to take the floor. We'll have the list, and we'll invite you to take the floor once we conclude with the speakers list. Given that we have limited time, we'll go directly to the speakers list. And we do have two delegations that will deliver in group statement. And so I would like to call on the distinguished representative of Côte d'Ivoire, who will deliver a statement on behalf of the African state parties. Côte d'Ivoire, you have the floor. I'm trying to have a good view of the room to be sure that
Yes, you are. Okay.
please just press the button with the speaker icon, and then.
C'est bien appuyé.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the states parties to the review mechanism, it's my honor to make this address on behalf of the African states parties to the Rome Statute at the ICC. The African states parties to the Rome Statute welcome this plenary session to examine the review mechanism as a platform for discussion on the process of the review and all of the work that has been done hitherto. We also will be looking at the implementation of the independent experts' recommendations. We welcome the fact that the review mechanism has done its job in an inclusive and transparent manner. We are grateful to the mechanism for all of the progress we've made so far. Beyond the assessment of the recommendations from the independent experts, the progress report and the comprehensive action plan that was put together at the last session, we see that the assessment of most of the recommendations has actually been completed. We take this opportunity to express our satisfaction when it comes to the work of the Bureau. They've adopted the proposal for the implementation of Recommendation 169, as recommended by the IER, when it comes to the Court's response to any attacks against it by non-state parties. This is another concrete result from the review mechanism. The African States Party also take note with satisfaction of the report of the review mechanism and the matrix, which reflects all of the exchanges we've had in consultations between states parties, the court, and other stakeholders. We greatly appreciate that the review mechanism report does include the comments made during discussions, especially in the framework of a roundtable on gender equality, workplace culture, balanced geographical representation, and the staff of the court. All of these issues remain top priority issues for the African states. The review mechanism called on us to think about various options regarding the way forward. The African parties support the call for a specific mandate from the Assembly or a facilitation on issues such as workplace culture and victims. Let us recall that the review mechanism was not set up to be a permanent body or process. And in light of the reticence to establish new bodies in the review process itself, African states take note of the need to continue supervising the implementation of the recommendations that have received a positive assessment and the working through of those that haven't yet, involving also the Secretariat of the Assembly of States Parties whenever necessary. The States Parties from Africa set great store by the review mechanism within the ICC and its benefits for the entire Rome Statute system. In this connection, we would like to reiterate our support for the review process and mechanism for rejuvenating the court, focusing on issues such as good governance, the principle of complementarity, cooperation, and the promotion of fair and diverse geographical representativity and gender balance. We are grateful to the work that's been done throughout the review mechanism. We fully support the court, and we are fully committed to continuing with this review process. The African States Parties also repeat the decision made by the African Union's heads of state and government vis-à-vis the ICC, where they all called on everybody to get involved in the review mechanism and to avoid politicization of the court. By way of conclusion, the African States Parties are convinced and hopeful that by joining together during this review mechanism, we will be able to improve the work of the ICC and the Rome Statute system. That will strengthen the court. It will strengthen the entire Rome Statute system, making them more effective, more legitimate, and making it possible to deliver effective justice, putting an end to impunity for the most serious crimes. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Côte d'Ivoire who spoke on behalf of the African State Parties. And I now have the honor of giving the floor to the distinguished representative of Norway, who will speak on behalf of the Nordic countries. You have the floor.
I have the honor of speaking on behalf of the Nordic states parties, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Sweden, and my own country, Norway. The ongoing review process is of paramount importance for a strong, effective, and independent court. We consider the review crucial for the future of the court, and we wholeheartedly stand behind the process. We are grateful to all the stakeholders for tirelessly working towards improving the court and the Rome Statute systems throughout this process. We commend the court's efforts in the review, including through updates on the status of internal assessments. And we thank civil society for playing an important role, pointing to challenges and solutions we as state parties might not see. Now it is time to increase our focus on implementation. Genuine follow-up with a focus on results is vital to ensure that the immense efforts that have already been dedicated to the process will bear fruit. Going forward, we will continue to give priority to improving the governance of the court. We welcome the ongoing dialogue between states parties and the court towards enhancing the efficiency and effectiveness of the court. A prerequisite for achieving better governance is a healthy workplace environment. The independent experts' findings on the workplace culture at the court were deeply concerning, and the recent report of the IOM on workplace culture in the judiciary backs up the experts' findings. We are troubled by the findings of a culture of fear and distrust, sexual harassment and bullying behavior throughout the court. A healthy workplace culture is essential to maintain productivity and staff well-being, ensure efficient operations, and enhance the reputation of an organization. This is, of course, important in any workplace, but an international court charged with upholding justice for victims must be held to the very highest standard. The latest report of the review mechanism documents substantial efforts that have been invested into improving the workplace culture. We are encouraged by the establishment of a set of core values for the court as a whole, and we welcome the recruitment of an ombudsperson. We regard positively steps towards gender equality, including the work of the focal point for gender equality towards countering sexism and unconscious bias. We warmly welcome the ICC strategy on gender equality and workplace culture, which will be launched later this week. And we will follow with interest the new staff selection policy to improve geographical representation and gender balance at the court. At the Office of the Prosecutor, we are encouraged by Prosecutor Khan's commitment to zero tolerance for all forms of misconduct. It is important that this policy is enforced wisely, bearing in mind the best interest of the court and of its staff as a whole. All staff should have recourse to a well-functioning resolution mechanism in which they have confidence. Overall, we urge the court to meaningfully engage its staff in the process to improve the workplace culture. We believe that active participation by the staff in the implementation of recommendations which affect them, including through the Staff Union Council, is key to sustainable results. Now that we are moving into a new phase, we have an opportunity to ensure the harmonious, efficient, and effective governance of the ICC. This must be done through our joint endeavors. In closing, we reiterate our gratitude to the review mechanism and express our full support for its guidance going into the implementation phase. We bear in mind the common objective of this process to ensure that the ICC and the Rome Statute system are optimized to deliver on their core mandate of fighting impunity and delivering justice to the victims of the worst crimes imaginable. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Norway who spoke on behalf of the Nordic countries. And that's the group statement that we have. We'll now go to individual delegations. Let me just use this opportunity to remind speakers of the time limit of 3 minutes, so we'll be able to conclude the speakers list and then get to the interactive dialogue in good time. I do have the honor to call on the distinguished representative of Mexico. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair. Mexico would like to begin by paying tribute to your leadership and all of your hard work, along with Ambassador Van der Zijl, in continuing with the review exam mechanism and the implementation of all of the recommendations that have been positively assessed from the IER. We also express our thanks to the experts that provided us with assistance throughout all of the meetings that we had as part of the review process this year, sharing their views on the various recommendations and giving us a clear understanding of the reasons why the rationale behind the recommendations. In 2022, considerable progress was made with the comprehensive action plan, maintaining the judicial independence of the court and the prosecutor's office. Now, during this process, we've had 2 roundtable discussions, and we managed to assess the key recommendations in order to improve the court on issues such as the workplace culture, the adoption of a system of tenure, the trust fund for victims, the participation of victims in the court's procedures, reparations and assistance to victims, the strategic vision of the court over the next 10 years, and its relationship with civil society, amongst others. Also, we were kept apprised of all of the progress made by the various bodies of the ICC in order to implement or start to implement a large number of the experts' recommendations. In this connection, my country would like to express its gratitude to the court for all of the hard work that it's done despite the heavy workload that it's contending with. Chair, coordinators, you can count on Mexico's continued support and active participation in this throughout 2023. We will do this in accordance with the terms of the Comprehensive Action Plan. We remain committed to continuing to work on this in order to improve and strengthen the performance and the effectiveness of the course in a transparent and inclusive process. Once again, thank you very much for leadership, Ambassadors Kanu and Van der Zijl.
I thank the Ambassador of Mexico for his statement, and I have the honor to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Australia. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair, Honourable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. 3 years have passed since this Assembly launched, by consensus, a state-driven process to review the International Criminal Court and the Rome Statute system. Australia is committed to strengthening and supporting the court. That is why we remain focused on the implementation of the court's reform priorities, to ensure that the court is optimally placed to deliver its important mandate now and into the future. We commend the review mechanism on its leadership and on the progress made over the course of the year. We are pleased that many of the independent expert review recommendations have now been positively assessed and are progressing through to implementation. We also commend the court's continued constructive engagement in the review process. But there is still much work to be done. Current resource and workload pressures underscore the urgency of reforms to make the court more efficient and more effective. The coming year presents us with an opportunity to redouble our efforts and to progress the implementation of these recommendations with renewed vigour and pragmatism. A key priority for Australia is strengthening the alignment of the court's resources and strategic direction with its core mandate as a court of last resort. We look forward to the Office of the Prosecutor releasing its report on complementarity. As co-focal points on the complementarity with Uganda, Australia welcomes the continued engagement of the court, states parties and civil society on this topic. We look forward to continuing our discussions on complementarity-related recommendations in 2023. Australia also considers reforms to the court's workplace culture, gender and geographic representation, as well as its arrears policy, as key priorities. We thank the court for its efforts and the progress made to date to improve the court's workplace culture, among other priorities. As we know, achieving cultural change does not happen overnight, and entrenching it is an ongoing endeavour. We must continue to work towards this objective and evaluate the effectiveness of steps taken. This is crucial to ensuring the court's operational effectiveness. Whilst we focus on implementing these reforms for the court of today, we must also have an eye to the court of the future. We thank the review mechanism for facilitating consideration this year of the development of a 10-year strategic vision for the court. Australia continues to support the development of this vision as a crucial investment in the future of the court. A strategic, pragmatic and principled vision is crucial to navigating the new challenges the future will bring. Any discussion must be underpinned by significant progress made by the court and the Assembly in implementing reform. Chair, as a long-standing supporter of the court, Australia remains committed to working in partnership with the court and states parties in 2023 to promote reform, to strengthen and support the court in delivering accountability now and into the future. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Australia, and I have the honour to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Japan. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Ambassador Kanu and Ambassador Vanden Eysel, for facilitating today's meeting, as well as the discussion at the Hague Working Group this year. I would like to briefly make two concrete points that Japan believes are particularly important in relation to the review mechanism and for the future of the ICC. The first is the introduction of a tenure policy applicable to some ICC officials. In order to vitalize the organization, it is necessary to adopt a tenure system. And as you reported on the first day of the ASP meeting this week, state parties positively assessed the relevant IER recommendation at the meeting in June. That is to say, state parties agreed to introduce a tenure policy. From this point forward, it is important to proceed with substantive and constructive discussions on the design of a tenure system, such as duration of the term and the permissibility of exceptions, and to introduce a system at the earliest possible time. It is therefore very opportune for the ASP to adapt a draft resolution before us at this session. Given the importance of this subject, Japan would like to request you to allocate sufficient time for discussion on the design of the new tenure system next year. The second is improvement of the work environment. The IOM evaluation report on the workplace culture in the judiciary contains informative findings, some of which were shocking, to be frank. There must be no bullying or harassment or abuse of authorities at the ICC, which is an institution dedicated to achieving justice. Such behavior would instantly extinguish the international community's expectations of the ICC. And it is a disservice to the efforts of many staff members who are diligently and seriously engaged in their duties. Japan highly appreciates President Hofmansky's leadership and the active involvement of many judges and staff members in producing the IOM report. We also commend the revision of the Code of Judicial Ethics in October as a positive step forward. At the same time, we are of the view that preparation of the report and revision of the code are not ends in themselves. It is imperative to improve the work environment on a factual basis. We should continue to pay particular attention to this matter in the review of the ICC, and would like us to ask the state party representatives and focal points to keep this in mind when considering the work program for the coming year. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Japan. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom. You have the floor, please.
Thank you, Ambassador, for giving me the floor. The United Kingdom strongly supported the commissioning of the independent export review process in 2019, recognising, I think, amongst other states, that the need for the court to improve its performance in a number of areas to meet the demands of international justice and deliver its mandate. The review mechanism has performed an excellent service in assessing and prioritising the recommendations, and we look forward to the completions of those remaining. It is important the states parties are assured in the round that the recommendations are being implemented. The facilitations will prove a valuable role in assessing and implementing the recommendations. However, the UK still sees the value of a single body that can report to the Bureau and states parties on the overall picture. We do not see this body as being permanent, but rather as a continuing body until states are satisfied that the recommendations are implemented or are in the process of implementation. We therefore welcome the roadmap outlined by the review mechanism chair, which will see the mechanism continue to monitor the overall process, including implementation. We support the extension of the review mechanism's mandate for a further period of 12 months. We reiterate that the implementation of the recommendations is a shared endeavour and that states parties are crucial to the effective implementation, as well as the court itself. It is also interesting to note and important to note the work on the draft strategic plans for 2023 to 2025. And we note the registry's draft includes implementations of the IER's recommendations as a priority, with a detailed process with a timetable and decision-making governance required for actual implementation. The UK fully supports this approach, embedding it within the strategic plans across all organs of the court, and will certainly be submitting comments, I think, as other states would need to do by the end of January. Ambassador, the implementation of the IER recommendations remains a top priority of the United Kingdom, and we will continue to work collaboratively with states parties and the court as the review process continues. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom, and I have the honor of giving the floor to the distinguished representative of France. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Representatives of the review mechanism of the court, representatives of the course, distinguished delegates. France was one of the first countries to come forward and support the idea of an external audit of the ICC in order to improve its functioning and to come up with solutions in order to face challenges both without and within that the court faces. The publication in September 2020 of the report of the independent experts made it possible for us to take stock of the situation and to look at recommendations in order to improve the way in which the court operates and to improve the functioning of the overall Rome Statute system. France supported the establishment by the Assembly of setting up a review mechanism that would come up with very concrete, rapid, and ambitious program of work to improve the work. And we welcome the fact that the discussions held during 2022 have given positive results. We've made it possible to assess many of the recommendations and implement quite a few. That's very encouraging. The establishment of an ombudsman within the court who should be taking up his or her duties over the coming weeks is a concrete manifestation of all the work that's been done. We would like to express our appreciation for the commitment of all of the bodies of the court in this constructive dialogue with states parties on all of their recommendations, as well as the commitment they've made to respond very quickly to the most priority items. France believes that the time for effective implementation, the holistic implementation of all of the experts' recommendations has come, especially for 363 on the tenure policy. The Assembly is the guarantor of the sound management and administration of the court, and therefore must be involved in the decisions that are being made and the implementations for these recommendations. The very success of the court hinges upon this over the coming years. It's also an issue of trust between the court and states parties who have created this court and who support the court. France will play its full part. Chairman, the implementation of the recommendations should come out of a shared effort, the coordination of the bodies of the court with states parties and civil society. This is the 20th anniversary of the entry into force of the Rome Statute. Therefore, it behooves all of us to continue to support this still very young institution and to do everything we can to strengthen it. You can count on France's determination in order to continue with this job that's gotten off to such a cracking start, thanks to the review mechanism, those involved at the focal points. We're very grateful to all of them for their work. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of France, and I have the honor to give the floor to Ad Country Focal Point and the Ambassador of Chile. You have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador. We would like to express our gratitude to you for your leadership as well as that of Ambassador Van Eysen as representatives of the states parties in this mechanism. We would also like to express our gratitude to our other country focal points, Bangladesh and Poland. Now, this year we've had very fruitful exchanges with state parties, civil society, but in particular with the representatives of the focal points that represent the court. They were actively involved with great devotion and dedication throughout the entire process. From our standpoint, I would just like to touch on some of the highlights. The mandate of the mechanism should be renewed in order to complete the assessments of the recommendations of the independent experts as proposed in the draft resolution. The implementation of the recommendations that have received a positive assessment should be something that is monitored in an ongoing fashion by the existing facilitations. Efforts to improve the performance of the court should be ongoing and should not simply end with the formal conclusion of the mandate of the mechanism. Therefore, the court and the states parties, working together with civil society, should create new opportunities to think about the progress that's been made so far and the future of the review process. So, sir, let me conclude by saying that we are very willing and very committed to continue acting as an country focal point over the coming period. Thank you.
I thank the Ambassador. Thank you for your statement and, of course, your engagement in the work of the review mechanism. And similarly, I have the honor of giving the floor to our country focal point, Poland. You have the floor.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Poland, as a member of the review mechanism at country focal point, has the privilege of being closely involved in the review process. As the assessment of the recommendations of the independent expert review is slowly being finalized and the implementation of the positively assessed recommendations continues, we may be tempted to make a preliminary summary of our joint achievements. There is no doubt that great progress has been made in the assessment of the IER recommendations by the Assembly mandate holders and the review mechanism itself. Any remaining recommendations should be assessed during the first half of 2023. We hope that we will be able to clear any backlogs in the assessment process by then. The focus has already shifted to the implementation of positively assessed recommendations, which is an ongoing commitment. It will ensure that the tangible outcome of the review process does not fade, but contributes to improving the efficiency of the Rome Statute system. The implementation should continue to be carried out in full respect of the judicial and prosecutorial independence. Distinguished delegates, I said earlier that we might be tempted to make a preliminary summary of the progress made, but we certainly should not be tempted yet to draw any final conclusions on the success or failure of the review exercise. We still have a lot of work ahead of us, but our important achievement is that we, all stakeholders, working together throughout the review process, dealing with nearly every aspect of the court's work, have already proved that the review process has become a joint undertaking that unites us despite differences and shows that we all have one goal: to support the ICC so that it can fulfill its mission of delivering justice for all victims of egregious atrocities. To conclude, Mr. Chairs, I would like to reaffirm Poland's readiness to continue our engagement in the review process as a member of the review mechanism. And on a more personal note, if I may, I would like to wholeheartedly thank the review mechanism state party representatives, Ambassador Paul van den Eyssel and Ambassador Michael Kano, for their hard work and excellent leadership this year. And I also thank my fellow at-country focal points, colleagues from Bangladesh and Chile, and of course the court focal points, Hirat, Juan and Racine. Thank you so much for fruitful and pleasant cooperation, as always. And last but not least, I would like to express my deepest gratitude to the Secretariat for the support provided, to Gail and Aaron. Thank you so much. You know that without your personal dedication, it would not have been possible to fulfill all the tasks assigned to the review mechanism. Thank you so much.
I thank the distinguished representative of Poland. Thank you, dear Paulina, for your statements, kind words, but also your active engagement in the work of the review mechanism. And I have the honor of giving the floor to the Ambassador of Belgium. You have the floor, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you, ambassadors. Perhaps I could begin quite simply by picking up where the delegate of Poland has just left off. She expressed comprehensive thanks to everybody, with a lot of enthusiasm that I think is very characteristic of Paulina, and I can only go along with that. Belgium supports the review process of the ICC and the Rome Statute, which is underway. It's a useful exercise, and we will continue to be very actively involved in it during the intercessional period. I personally would just like to make a couple of comments on the process, not so much on the substance itself or on the recommendations or any specific recommendations, because I don't think that that's necessary. This is necessarily the place to do that. But having said that, I would just say that I share many of the concerns that have been expressed by the previous speakers, and in particular by the statement made on behalf of the African group and the Nordic group in particular, especially when it comes to workplace culture, zero tolerance when it comes to abuse of any type, and gender equality. As part of the process, Belgium would once again like to begin by expressing its gratitude for the work done by the court itself. There's been a serious commitment from all of the bodies via the focal points that have been working alongside us throughout the review exercise. This was shown firstly by the court's positive response to having an external audit, which is something that was already a great sign from the outset, but in particular all of its contributions, all of its submissions in writing and orally since then have really made a big difference. And we've seen this throughout all the facilitations and the work of the experts themselves. Now, there are still many recommendations that are being implemented. Some of them, in fact, had already seen the light of day before before the experts came along and made their recommendations. And these were some of the things that cropped up during some of the meetings that were held in other facilitations. I would also like to express the rigorous work of organizing and coordinating the work by the review mechanism. That's already been mentioned by others. And I'll go into that in greater detail when I look at the future of the mechanism in just a few moments.
As has already been pointed out, in my delegation, the work that the states parties are to do is actually, I think, considerable. Self-inflicted pain is the way that it was described, self-inflicted pain on states parties. I do think this is actually true, but it's actually the way that the experts wrote their report and the number of recommendations therein that made it certainly feel that way. It was intense, but it also showed how difficult it is for some states parties and even for big delegations to actually follow all of the work that's going. And I think this really does highlight one of the challenges of the process. I think we have to be aware of this more than once. We've actually found ourselves taking part in meetings and finding out on the spot that some of the recommendations had not actually be followed through in enough depth, and everybody really needed to take that on board. And so this comes back to the idea of a state-driven process, which is, I think everyone was worried about when they first looked at the documents. For Belgium, the state-driven process well, we kind of didn't really agree with the idea of state-driven, but we're very aware of the idea of categorization. And so when we heard state-driven process, meaning that it's basically states that need to dig into their pockets all the way through, we thought that this was an exercise about improving management. And so initially we were a bit apprehensive about that, and we thought, isn't this really a question of categorization? Because if it were, That would mean that what is supposed to be attributed to the court should have been attributed to the court, and there's a reason for that. So that is that was actually some of the that was one of our apprehensions, because we didn't ever want to see the court's independence undermined. But for me, state-driven really does mean that what needs to be decided by the states must be decided by states. Implementation of the recommendations should never be presumed. The experts, I think, have done a marvellous job, and we're very cognizant of their work. But when it comes to the recommendations, there are responsibilities for states parties. Not all of the recommendations are good. Some are excellent. Some of them have drawn excellent inspiration, and now it's up to member states to decide what they really want to do, and that is their role in the review mechanism. I think this process has played a very significant role in one sense, with this the mix of pragmatism and rigor, which really pushed the process along. Also, the importance on the principle of inclusiveness and transparency. I thought that was very important, that those were always respected. And then, just by way of conclusion, you did ask a question about the way forward. I think this is a real preliminary question, but for the moment, I think yes, the first thing is to renew your mandate. That's the very first step, and that's the draft decision that's before us. We never wanted the process to be eternal, and yet at the same time, we do need to recognise that here again, this process does need to be centralised to a minimum degree, so as to ensure good monitoring of the recommendations. In other words, the post-assessment phase. Just monitoring the rollout of all of the different recommendations and things that have been evaluated positively and effectively. So, in theory, from the outset, we weren't actually initially in favour of having this monitoring work and coordinating work of the process being in the Bureau's hands. We thought that the mechanism itself was working fine independently, but we now, I guess, the discussion is open as to see whether the process could be slimmed down a little bit. But we're really quite flexible thereupon. I think my key message is: we love you. Keep it up, and we hope that your successors will also do an excellent job as you have. Thank you.
I thank the Ambassador of Belgium for his statement, and we thank you for the love. I have the honor to give the floor to the distinguished representative of Bangladesh, another ad country focal point. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am delivering this statement on behalf of our ambassador. Bangladesh appreciates the work of the review mechanism and applauds the co-facilitators, Ambassador Van der Eijzel and Ambassador Michael Kanu, for steering the mechanism's work throughout in a judicious and transparent manner. It's also good to see the ways you, Madam Mr. President, the court focal points, the assembly mandate holders, and the civil society engaged throughout in open and constructive manner. As an ad-country focal point, Bangladesh engaged both in The Hague and in New York, leading to the adoption of the comprehensive work plan, and notes the progress made in the plan's implementation. We believe the matrix prepared by the review mechanism, stating the status and outcome of the assessments of the IEA recommendations, constitute important reference point for member states and all principals in evaluating the progress in the court's review process. While assessment of some recommendation will continue until the middle of 2023, as per the Comprehensive Action Plan, it will be useful to soon engage on implementation of the recommendations that have been positively assessed. We are open to suggestions from all stakeholders, including civil society, on how best to follow up the positively assessed recommendations. While assessment of the sum of the recommendations will continue as per the SEP, let us discuss how we pronounce on the negatively assessed recommendations. We also need to decide on the future of the mechanism beyond 2023, besides advancing on the comprehensive action plan implementation. Bangladesh sees utility in the mechanism to continue in a modicum of follow-up role on the recommendations that are already under implementation or would proceed for implementation. It would also be important to designate an entity to oversee the matters of the IEA recommendations in entirety. The Assembly may reflect on possible actions. I flag this being mindful of the mandate to the review mechanism given by all states parties, aiming to meaningfully augmenting the efficacy of the code, ensuring best use of the limited resources, and also giving universalizing of the code. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Bangladesh, who was the last state party's speaker on the list. I'll now move on to the Staff Union Council and then proceed to civil society. I have the honor to give the floor to the President of the Staff Union Council. You have the floor, please.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Yes, the Staff Union Council of the ICC thanks you for giving us the floor. The Staff Union Council would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge the efforts that have been made over this last year by the court. The SUC was involved in many activities run by the court, and we thank them for that. While this is perhaps the very first step in building the overall structure, we are very aware that there's a long way yet to go if we want positive and healthy work environments. We want to remain critical and constructive, and we think that that is actually our job, to bring everyone's attention as to what needs to be improved. So why are we saying there's a long way to go? Well, quite simply because the SUC keeps receiving and keeps discussing with the members of staff that they still can't see any positive outcomes despite the actions taken by the court. We still hear of staff members suffering from overwork or exhaustion, or who fear for their safety, or feel that they have inappropriate management structures around them, or that they don't feel heard by upper management. Some decide to leave the court, while many decide to stay. And indeed, they do so despite the disillusionment, and they keep hoping that our organization might be able to make a difference. So we want to encourage our leaders to keep taking concrete, visible action so as to regain staff trust and make sure that our working culture becomes a healthy working culture, becomes something that's a reality and not just a stated wish. On the issue of tenure, the SUC has made multiple submissions, and we hope that this policy will be adopted by the court with its positive and negative impacts to be envisaged upstream and in a holistic manner. And we want to remain involved in this. For the review process, the SUC hopes that we can keep making all the difference. Thank you very, very much for listening.
I thank the President of the Staff Union Council for a statement, but also indeed for the engagement of the Staff Union Council in the work of the review mechanism. I now move on to civil society, and I have the honor of inviting the representative of Human Rights Watch. You have the floor, please. I hope you have a microphone and you can just press the button.
There's somewhere there in the back. I don't see it.
You do have the floor, please.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for giving us the opportunity. I'm speaking to you today on behalf of the Coalition for the ICC review team, which was established in an effort to coordinate civil society's effort around the complex and overwhelming IR process. We welcome the organization of this dedicated plenary session on the review process, allowing for greater engagement with all stakeholders, including civil society. Civil society, through the review team, has actively engaged with the mechanism throughout 2022, and we welcome the opportunity to do so today. As the assessment of AI recommendations draw to a close, and as we look towards the implementation of the positively assessed recommendations by the court and this assembly, we would like to recall the central objective of the review process, which is to enhance the capacity of the ICC and its ability to more effectively serve the communities affected by its work. Looking ahead to the future of the process, we would like to share the following recommendations. The first is the implementation of the positively assessed recommendations should be ongoing to ensure progress continues to be made and that the assessment process is not simply a box-ticking exercise, but a genuine step towards improving the efficiency and the effectiveness of the court. Secondly, Mr. Ambassador, the efforts to improve the court's performance should also be ongoing and not simply end with the conclusion of the mechanism's mandate. This includes ensuring that progress achieved in this process is not lost, and on the contrary, that the court, state parties, and other stakeholders continue to build on that progress. The court and the state parties, in collaboration with civil society, should create opportunities to reflect on the progress achieved in the review process thus far, including by assessing whether the key objectives of the strengthening the court's delivery of justice has been achieved and identify potential gaps that remain. Further, we welcome the review mechanism's continued emphasis on ensuring the review process is led by the following fundamental principles and recommend that they continue beyond the mandate of the mechanism. First is transparency, which contributes to a legitimate and credible process, including by the regular and consistent communication about progress and next steps in different languages and ensuring that the inclusive access of all stakeholders to meetings. Second, and related to the above, is inclusive and meaningful engagement with stakeholders. Civil society has been an essential stakeholder in the review process since its conception, a practice which must continue. Thirdly and finally is respect for the court's judicial and prosecutorial independence and the consciousness of the limited resources. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
I thank the representative of the Coalition for the International Criminal Court. There was an inscription for Human Rights Watch.
Many thanks for the opportunity to address the plenary on behalf of Human Rights Watch. As the assessment phase of the independent expert review seemingly nears completion, this is an opportune time to discuss the implementation phase and the future of the review process. We welcome states parties' intention to renew the review mechanism's mandate to finish any outstanding assessments of recommendations. As part of its work next year, and as indicated in its report, we encourage the mechanism to provide guidance on the best way forward for what will be an ongoing implementation phase. In our view, this implementation phase should be guided by the following principles, in addition to the ones already highlighted by the Coalition for the ICC. First, efforts to improve the court's performance should remain part of the court's regular work. There should also be a shared commitment to continue the process of reflection, including a focus on ASP-directed recommendations and the responsibilities of states parties in providing financial, political, and practical support. Second, in deciding on the means of reporting, there is a need to balance accountability with the court's independence, including by not overburdening it. This could be achieved through a calendar of quarterly intersessional reporting to the Assembly and a standing review agenda item at each annual session. Third, to avoid bureaucratization and instead ensure that the process is manageable, reporting on implementation should be streamlined around clusters of recommendation and also include a more holistic approach to topics. Fourth, there are a number of recommendations which were positively assessed and have budgetary implications. Their implementation should not be hindered by the lack of adequate resources. Fifth, the review mechanism could also consider whether there should be a process by which to revisit assessments. And finally, and importantly, we hope you can ensure the continuation of good practices that have allowed genuine participation of civil society. In conclusion, we hope you can commit to actively engaging in next year's discussions in a view of achieving concrete outcomes in full respect of the court's independence. We look forward to continuing to work with you and the court in our collective effort to strengthen the court's delivery of justice. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Human Rights Watch for her statement. This exhausts the list of speakers, but I would like to give perhaps delegations, civil society, other stakeholders the opportunity to say something, to respond to something said, add to something which is said. This is your opportunity. I don't see, but help me because my eyesight is not so good and the hall is big. If I don't see anyone, I think before we conclude, I would like to invite the court to perhaps say a few words based on the things we heard from state parties and other stakeholders. Gerard or Racine or Juan, I don't know who would.
Thank you, Ambassador. I'm not sure we would. I can't speak to Racine from at this distance, but I think we don't have anything to add but to say that we remain committed to working with the review mechanism or whatever entity is going to be in charge of this and the facilitations, as we have done throughout the last 18 months or almost 2 years. And we've heard also what the Staff Union Council's president said, and we will discuss and continue the discussion on everything that was said separately, of course, at the court. Some of the things that were said were alarming, so it would be very important for us to follow up. We have our monthly meetings, but we would propose that we double that and see what we can do. And we also heard what civil society said. Everything has been noted. We have been taking notes, and naturally what also states parties said. And that's all that I have to say. We remain committed to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gerard. I'm informed that the ambassador of Belgium would like to say something. Please, you have the floor.
Oui, merci.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Forgive me for taking the floor again, but we did ask for a reaction, if there were any reactions, and I just wanted to thank all of the speakers. And I just wanted to offer one thing by way of response to the two civil society interventions that we heard. I really do think that this subject, like all subjects actually that we're discussing here, I do think that the input from civil society is of key importance, and they have a huge added value. And I was actually lucky enough to recently take part in dialogue with the civil society and states parties, and I just wanted to say how important their input is. But also one specific issue is about the budgetary implications, and I think this is a really important point. It's almost a weak point. It's one particularity of our report. Of the IER, they didn't actually clarify neither on the idea of what it would mean from a statutory perspective and what would it mean in terms of budgetary impact. And this is just a general comment. In the report overall, I'm sure there would be some recommendations, I can't remember which ones, that do might actually require statutory changes, and I can't remember which ones, like I say, but others I'm sure might have a budgetary impact, and it's not actually part of our matrix when we analyse that work. I just wanted to point that out. Thank you.
I thank the Ambassador of Belgium. Dear colleagues, we still have 10 minutes. I'm still looking around the room whether there's someone who wants to say. If not, I will start concluding. I will start concluding. Conclude with housekeeping is that we have arranged for an informal consultation on the draft resolution. I heard a lot of support today. I hope to hear the same tomorrow. That will take place tomorrow at 10 a.m. till 10:45 in room Europe 1-2 I don't know whether there are two separate rooms, but I don't think so. So in room Europe, and we hope to conclude by the resolution. Second remark is we invited you to share your preliminary views or non-preliminary views on the future. We listened with great attention. Many of you said something how they would see the future. We will not draw a conclusion now. What we intend is that we will next year somewhere reach out to you with our ideas on how the future will look like. And we can have perhaps a separate discussion on that. And of course, in the end, the future of the review mechanism is in your hands. So we can just bring in two ideas, but you have to decide. Second observation, I heard a lot of people speaking about the good cooperation. And I subscribe to that. Those who have been at the ICC as state party representatives in different roles and have a little bit of history like myself know that when we started this process, that was not a given, I think. Tensions were running high sometimes. And I often had the idea that this exercise could turn out in a we against them exercise. And I think it has not happened. At least that's what I hear and that's what I myself experience. And I think that's a very positive development because I think we have to do it together. And many of you have stressed the need for continuing this cooperative effort. And that is what the review mechanism intends to do. On that note, I think we can conclude our session. I thank you all for your input, for your statements, for your words of thanks, for your comments, for your advice. We will take them to heart. And before we leave the room, I think the Secretariat wants to make an announcement. Please, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Ambassador. There will be a meeting of the African group tomorrow morning at 9:30 to 10:30 in this room, the Willem Alexander Hall. Thank you.
On that note, I think there will be another meeting here, but on the omnibus resolution, but not so this meeting, I thank you once again, and this meeting stands adjourned. Thank you.